Okay, now that we have seen the results in this section, it's time for us to solve the exercises. So in this first one, we are given that H is a subgroup of a group G with the property that if we take the product of any two right cosets of H in G, then the product is again a right coset of H in G. We then have to prove that H is normal in G. H is a normal subgroup of G. So let us see how we can get a solution. Let G be any element in G. Then GH G inverse. If we can show that this set is contained in H, then that will prove that H is normal in G. We already know that this is not just a subset of G, but rather it's a subgroup of G. Now note that this subgroup is actually contained in HGH G inverse. Why is that so? Because if you take any element here, that element will look like this. Its general form is this, where H is any element in H. Now this element can be written like this, EGH G inverse, where E can be thought of as coming, in fact E is coming from H because H is a subgroup. So this is an element in this. That's why this subgroup is contained in this product. Now because we have the associative law in the group, so this product can be written like this, HG inverse, as a product of these two right cosets of H in G. Now our hypothesis says that this product is itself a right coset of H in G. By the hypothesis, HG inverse is a right coset of H in G. But which right coset will it be? Note that, say you have the set here, this product, okay, you have it here, HG inverse, and you have, it is given that it's a right coset of H in G, and you have the other right cosets also, which are disjoint from this one. In fact, they are mutually disjoint. If you take any two of them which are distinct, then they are disjoint. Now if you can find an element in this coset which also belongs to a known coset of H in G, I mean here we only have the fact from the hypothesis that this is a right coset of H in G. Which right coset we don't know yet, we need to determine that. But if we find a right coset of H, suppose some right coset HA, which happens to have an element common with this one, then disjointness of distinct right cosets would imply that HA has to be equal to this product. That means this product is this particular right coset. So that's what we are going to do now, and the argument goes like this: since distinct right cosets of H in G are disjoint. This is one thing. The element E, which can be written like this, EG inverse, belongs to HG inverse. Because E is coming from H, so this product, which ultimately turns out to be the identity element, it belongs to this product. And E belongs to the right coset H of H. H itself is also a right coset of H in G. So because of these things, that is what we are saying is this element E, it belongs to H, at the same time it belongs to this product. So our disjointness of distinct right cosets and our hypothesis that this has to be a right coset force us to conclude that this must be equal to this. We must have HG inverse equal to H. So now we can combine these two pieces of information. This is contained in this and this is equal to this. Hence, GHG inverse is contained in H. Which shows that H is normal in G. So this completes the solution. Let us see the second one. The second one becomes useful when working with subgroups. It often becomes useful because we often come across subgroups of index 2 and they are normal. That's what the second one says. If G is a group and H is a subgroup of index 2 in G, prove that H is a normal subgroup of G. Okay. Since index of H in G is equal to 2, that's the only thing that is given. There are two right cosets of H in G and like that two left cosets and it 8. and two left cosets of H in G. If H is an element in, or instead of taking it as H, let us take it as G. If G is an element in H, then obviously GH G inverse will be equal to H, because it's coming from inside of H and H is a subgroup, so GH G inverse will be equal to H. So let us take an element G from outside of H, say. If for this element also we can prove that GH G inverse is equal to H, then H will be normal in G. But since we are taking this G from outside of H, so the left coset GH and the right coset HG will both be different from H. Then the left coset GH is not equal to H and the right coset HG is also not equal to H. And HG is also not equal to H. Okay, now it is given that there are two right cosets of H in G and two left cosets of H in G, and in fact we have found them already. Since so one of the left cosets is GH and the other left coset is H. Like that, one of the right cosets is HG and the other right coset is H. So since if you take the union of the left cosets, you get the group itself. Like that, if you take the union of the right cosets, then also you get the group. And distinct left cosets are disjoint, distinct right cosets are also disjoint. GH intersection K. To avoid confusion, let us put them in brackets. This is empty and HG intersection H is also empty. We have already written that. Because of these things, GH and HG must be equal, because their union is, the situation is like this. You have two parts, one of them is HG and the other is H, and they are disjoint, there is no intersection. That's why I have drawn them like this, and their union is G. At the same time, you have two disjoint left cosets also, GH and H, and their union is also G. Since these two are equal, because of this equality, these two also have to be equal. If you want to really be sure why this is true, you just take an element in this right coset HG, just some element, okay, some X say. Then X belongs to HG means X belongs to the union of HG and H. That means X must belong to G, and that's why X must belong to either GH or H. But X belongs to HG means X does not belong to H, and this comes from disjointness of these two things. So X cannot belong to H, but at the same time X either belongs to GH or H. So that means X must belong to this left coset. That's how you get the inclusion that Hg is contained in GH. Conversely also you can consider an element here, and using these relations you can prove that that element must belong to this. So the reverse inclusion is also true. From these two things you can conclude that they are equal. But we are not of course going to write all these things. We will just simply write, since these relations are true, we have GH equal to HG. This implies, this is very easy to prove from this equation, that GHG inverse is equal to H. So we have seen that if we are choosing an element from the original group which happens to be inside H itself, then GHG inverse is equal to H. And if such an element is outside H also, then also we have this. That means for any element G in G, this equation is true. So that just tells us that H is normal in G. Hence H is a normal subgroup of G. Next 3. If N is a normal subgroup of G, and H is any subgroup of G, prove that NH is a subgroup of G. Now this NH of course is the product of two subgroups we defined earlier. Now we know from our previous study of products like this that such a product is a subgroup if and only if NH is equal to HN. More specifically, we have this because of lemma 251. It's in the section 2.5 where which is named a counting principle. You have that lemma here. Because of this lemma, it's enough to prove that NH is equal to HN. That will imply that NH is a subgroup of G. Note that we have already seen that if we take in place of N and H, if we take say K and H, where K and H are just subgroups of G, then it's not necessary that KH also be a subgroup of G. However, if one of the factors is a normal subgroup, then the product must be a subgroup. That's what this exercise says. So it's enough to prove that NH is equal to HN, and this is what we are going to do now. Let N be any element in N and H be any element in H. Okay. Then NH belongs to NH and NH can be written like this: H inverse NH. H and H inverse will cancel out and we will be left with NH. Now you can write this part like this also: H inverse N, H inverse inverse, because H inverse inverse is equal to H, and this belongs to HN. Note that, but we have to write the reason. Note that H inverse N, H inverse inverse belongs to N because N is normal. Since N is normal, this middle element N is coming from N, so whatever you have here, we have H inverse here, you form this product, so by definition of normality it must belong to N, and that's why this element coming from H and this element coming from N together, their product is in Hn. So we have proved that any element in NH is also in Hn. Thus, NH is contained in Hn. Also, now we are going to show the reverse inclusion. So now we are considering Hn. Hn belongs to Hn and Hn is equal to Hn H inverse H. Here also H inverse and H will cancel out and we will have Hn. Now this part belongs to N, because again N is normal and this middle element N is coming from capital N, and this of course belongs to H, so this belongs to NH. Thus Hn is also contained in NH. This shows NH is equal to Hn, and hence by lemma 251 NH is a subgroup of G. So this completes the solution. Exercise 4. Show that the intersection of two, okay. Of two normal subgroups of G, where G is a group, is again a normal subgroup of G. This one is quite straightforward. Let N1 and N2 be two normal subgroups of G. So they are normal, that is fine, but after all they are subgroups. So their intersection is a subgroup, which we already know from our previous study of subgroups. So we already know that N1 intersection N2 is a subgroup of G. So we have to just prove that this is normal in G. So let N be any element in N1 intersection N2 and G be any element in G. Then N belongs to N1, N belongs to N2 and G belongs to G. Since N1 is normal in G, that I am not writing, that is understood. So the conclusion is this: G and G inverse belongs to N1. The power has come back. Like that, since N2 is normal and N belongs to N2 also, so G and G inverse at the same time belongs to N2. We thus have G and G inverse belonging to their intersection. This proves that the intersection is normal in G. And that completes the solution. The number 5. So in this set of exercises, we will encounter many problems involving normal subgroups, and of course quotient groups also, because that is also a part of this section. If H is a subgroup of G, and N is a normal subgroup of G, show that H intersection N is a normal subgroup of H. Okay. Group theory all by itself is also interesting enough, but it becomes more interesting if there are additional structures associated with a group, like for example topological groups, which are groups but at the same time topological spaces, where the algebra of groups, that is the group theoretic properties, are related to the topology of the space in a particular way. We will see those things at some point, but first let us go through basic group theory, because we have many other things also to cover which are not available in this book. For example, this book does not discuss presentation of groups. This book also does not discuss group action, so we will have to go to some other texts for those things. So let us just finish the basics first. Okay, so in this case we are again given any subgroup H in G, and N is a normal subgroup of G. Now we have to prove that this intersection is a normal subgroup of H. First, let us argue that this intersection is a subgroup of H. Since H intersection N is known to be a subgroup of G. Known to be means from this from the previous exercise. Oh no, not from the previous exercise, sorry. This we are able to say because when we studied subgroups, there itself we saw that if we take the intersection of two subgroups, then it's again a subgroup. That's what we are using here. So since this is known to be a subgroup of G, and in fact this intersection is contained in H, so this is a subgroup of H. Now next we have to show it is normal in H. In H means that element that you are going to choose, one element you are going to choose from the subgroup, the other element you are going to choose from the group, and that element now will be coming from H, because now our group is H, we are inside H. So let G belong to H and N belong to H intersection N. Then G belongs to H, N belongs to H, and N also belongs to N. Since H is a subgroup of G, G and G inverse belongs to H. Because G and N are both elements of H, so such a product will be inside H because H is a subgroup. And the other thing is this, since n is normal in G, so you can think, although the element G is coming from H, but after all this is an element of the larger group G, so you think of this small g as coming from capital G, and this n is coming from n. N is in H, but that part is over. We have used it and concluded this. Now we are using this part. Small g belongs to G, small n belongs to n, and capital N is normal in G. So Gn G inverse also belongs to n. Thus Gn G inverse belongs to both H and N, so it belongs to their intersection. So that's it. That's what we needed to show in order to conclude that this is normal in H. This implies H intersection N is normal in H. So this completes the solution. Exercise 6. Again the power is gone. In this part of the world, the power supply is horrible. Show that every subgroup of an abelian group is normal. This is also quite easy, almost trivial. But trivial or not, we have to go through everything. I mean, as best as we can. Of course, at some point we are bound to encounter some problem which I will not be able to solve. Maybe you will not be able to solve. So those problems will remain. But we will try our level best to solve all the problems. And we will also, at some stage, we may come across a concept which will not be immediately clear. But we will try to understand such things. At this stage things are somewhat smooth because we haven't gone deep enough that the really involved and really complicated things will arise, but they will arise. Okay. So let us consider an abelian group. Let G be an abelian group and H be a subgroup of G. Let G be any element in G and N be any element in H. Then G and G inverse, if we can show that this element belongs to H, then that will prove H is normal in G. But it is given that G is abelian, so this G and G inverse can be written like this: Ng G inverse, because Gn is equal to Ng, they commute, and this is equal to N, which belongs to H, hence H is normal in G. That's it. So in an abelian group, being a subgroup is automatically will also ensure that it's normal. Okay, the next one is supposed to be difficult. 7. Is the converse of exercise 6 true? Yes. Exercise 6 says that if a group is abelian, then all of its subgroups are normal. The converse would be this: if all of the subgroups of a group are normal, then the group is abelian. And this turns out to be false. There exist groups which are non-abelian, but where all the subgroups are normal. If yes, prove it. If no, give an example. So here the answer is no. Of a non-abelian group, all of whose subgroups are normal. Now the solution I will write, but the solution in a sense will be incomplete. Incomplete means the solution will not itself be incomplete, but to actually understand the solution we have to wait until we get to section 210. So let me just write the thing and then we will see. The converse is false. And why that is so? For that, see exercise 21. Section 2.10. In this exercise, we will come across a group that is non-abelian, all of whose subgroups are normal. Now, I can tell you what this group is. It's called the group of quaternion units. But you will not be able to understand it if you haven't seen what quaternions are. If you have gone through the ring theory part from Herstein, or if you already know about real quaternions, there, if you know that part, then I can say this: real quaternions are objects which look like this, where alpha, beta, gamma and delta, these are real numbers, and this I, j and k, these are some symbols. Okay, so real quaternions are formal symbols which look like this. They are added component wise, in the sense that if you add this quaternion with any other quaternion, then the corresponding parts will get added. First, the first two real numbers which are not accompanied by any I, j or k, they will be added, and then the coefficients of I will be added. So like that you have the sum, and you have a somewhat complicated definition of product of two such quaternions also. With respect to this sum and product, the real quaternions form a ring. In fact, it forms a division ring or a skew field, which just simply means that if one ignores the zero quaternion, where all these components are zero, then the non-zero quaternions with respect to that complicated multiplication, they form a non-abelian group. In that group, there is a subgroup whose elements are these. Eight elements. This subgroup is a group, and this group is known as the group of quaternion units, which is non-abelian. The group itself is non-abelian, but all of its subgroups are normal in the group. So it is this example that we have in this exercise. So when we will solve it, we will know how all of its how all of its subgroups are normal and how it is not abelian. So it will be premature to discuss that here. We can discuss, of course, but since it's going to, again we have to handle it again in that section, so we just keep it as a piece of information. We just take my word for it, for now at least, that there is such an example. Okay, now next exercise 8. Give an example of a group G these give an example exercises in general are very tough, because if you are asked to do something, then you will somehow try to come up with a solution. But if you are supposed to give an example to prove that something is true or something is false, that false, showing that something is false, producing a counter example actually is very tough. You have to really go through many examples, and you will try to construct for yourself such an example. Usually at this level, when such problems are asked, it's usually the case that there is some standard example which the reader or whoever is going through the text is supposed to find at some point. But the notoriety of Herstein's problems is that sometimes you may come across a problem which demands an example which may not be available in the text at all, and it will be a miracle if you stumble upon that example somewhere else. So usually when we encounter such problems, we go on the internet and see what others have done about the problem. So that's how we can find. This particular one I have found somewhere. It's not by me. I struggled with this for a long time without any success. So give an example of a group G. Maybe someone took only a little time to find such an example. We cannot really say who will find what and when in mathematics. A subgroup H and an element A belonging to G such that AHA inverse is contained in H, but AHA inverse is not equal to H. So that means this subgroup will be a proper subgroup of H. It will not be equal to H. We have to find such a group, such a subgroup and an element. And this example is, it uses matrices, matrix groups. So let G be the group in example 2 to 6. When we discussed examples of groups, after we got the definition of a group, there we had one example, our first example of a matrix group. In this example, we saw 2 by 2 matrices with real entries which are non-singular, that is matrices of this form where A, B, C and D are real numbers, and non-singularity means this quantity, which we also know as the determinant of the matrix, is not equal to 0. And there in this example we saw that such matrices form a group under matrix multiplication. So that group we are talking about here. That is the group of all 2 by 2 real non-singular matrices under matrix multiplication. Let H be the cyclic subgroup generated by this matrix. This is the symbol for cyclic subgroup generated by the element that is inside. And let A be the element, that will also have to be a matrix, a 2 by 2 matrix, this diagonal matrix. Okay, 2 0 0 1. Then one can verify means you have to verify it for yourself. Okay, I have already done it, but I am not including those parts in the solution. Verify that AHA inverse if verifying something is unduly difficult and difficult for you to guess in fact how to proceed, then of course I will supply the details. Otherwise these routine things I will just skip. 1 n 0 1. The matrices in this subgroup look like this, where n is any integer. And AHA, no, this is not AHA inverse, this is H. AHA inverse will come down, and AHA inverse turns out to be equal to again such a group, but here the matrices look like this: 1 2n 0 1, and n still varies over the set of integers. So you can see that any matrix which looks like this is automatically a matrix of this form, because 2n after all is again an integer. 2n is an even integer, but after all it's an integer. So A inverse is contained in H. However, these two clearly are not equal, because this H has the element, this matrix 1 1 0 1, which is not there here, because this one is odd. All the matrices here have this first row second column entry and even integer, but this is odd. Note that A inverse is contained in H, but it is not equal to H, because this belongs to H but does not belong to A inverse. So this completes the solution. Then exercise 9. We will solve 2 more, and after that we will end this video. Suppose H is the only subgroup of order OH. In a finite group G. Prove that H is a normal subgroup of G. Okay. Let G belong to G. By exercise 4B of section 2.5, we know that G inverse, or if you want you can include the entire exercise 4. G inverse is a subgroup of G such that since G is finite, in fact it has order of H and it's a subgroup of a finite group, so it must also be finite. So because of that finiteness and because of this exercise, we know that not only is this a subgroup of G, but it has the same number of elements as H has, that is order of G inverse is equal to order of H. Now it is given that H is the only subgroup of this order. Now since here we have found that this subgroup also has the same order, so that uniqueness of H will force us to conclude that GH G inverse is in fact equal to H. Since H is the only subgroup of order this, we must have GH G inverse equal to H, and that just tells us that H is normal in G. Thus H is a normal subgroup of G. And we will solve one more, but let me put some more ink. This next exercise also will be quite important later on. We will have uses of this next one, 10th one. If H is a subgroup of G, now we are going to define a new subset of G, and its definition will use the subgroup H. It is the set of those elements G in G such that GH G inverse is equal to H. That is, it is the set of those group elements for which that this condition which appears in the definition of normality for a subgroup, this condition is true. Now we have to prove there are, I think, 4 parts, 4 subdivisions. Part A is this. NH is a subgroup of G. This we have to prove first. Then B, H is normal in NH. C, if H is a normal subgroup, of the subgroup K in G, then K is contained in NH. That is, the interpretation of this result is this, that is, NH is the largest normal subgroup, largest subgroup of G in which H is normal. in which H is normal. And the last one is quite easy. H is normal in G if and only if NH is equal to G. Okay, so let us first start by proving that NH is a subgroup of G. The reason for this notation, but before that, let's just once more see what the question is asking. NH is a subgroup of G. We have understood what NH is. Okay, from with the definition is clear. Now, after proving that it's a subgroup of G, we will then next have to prove that H is normal in NH. This in particular requires us to show that H is actually a subgroup of NH, and in fact it is normal in NH. And then if H turns out to be a normal subgroup of some subgroup K in G, then the K has to be inside NH. So that means in this sense NH is the largest subgroup of G in which H is normal. If H finds itself normal in any other subgroup, that other subgroup must be inside NH, and in that sense NH is the largest, a maximal subgroup. And finally H is normal in G if and only if NH is equal to G. So let us see the solution, and here we will end in this video, of course. First, to show that NH is a subgroup, first we need to make sure that it's non-empty. Note that EH, E inverse, where E is the identity element in the group, is clearly equal to H, because E belongs to H and H is a subgroup, and hence E belongs to NH, which definitely shows that NH is non-empty. Now let say G1 and G2 be two elements in NH. If we can prove that G1, G2 inverse belongs to NH, then by a previous criterion for showing that a subset is a subgroup, NH will be a subgroup. That means it's now enough to show that G1, G2 inverse belongs to NH. Now, because these two elements are in NH, they will satisfy this condition. Then G1H, G1 inverse is equal to H, and G2H, G2 inverse also is equal to H. Okay. I think we need to we will need another condition from this second one. Let me just think. G1, G2, no, it's okay, they will be enough. Now G1, G2, or will they be inverse? So if I take okay, yes, I need something else. The equation G2H, G2 inverse equal to H implies G2 inverse Hg2 is also equal to H. How to prove this? A careless or a rather informal way of showing that this is in fact a consequence of this is that you multiply on both sides by G2 inverse from the left. So here you will have G2 inverse, then within brackets G2H, G2 inverse. On the right hand side you will have G2 inverse H. That G2 inverse and G2 will cancel out, leaving you with H G2 inverse equal to G2 inverse H. Then you multiply on both sides by G2 from the right. So on the left hand side you will have H, on the right hand side you will have G2 inverse H G2. That's what we have written here. But that is just simply a way of figuring out what the ultimate thing will be. That is not a proof. The thing is that you can prove this equation from this equation. I want you to try. Of course you need to show that since these two are after all sets, they are subgroups fine, but as sets they are equal. So you take any element here, you prove that that element belongs to H, and in showing that you have to use this one. I think you should be able to prove that this implies this. Okay, now G1 G2 inverse H G1 G2 inverse whole inverse. If we can show that this equals H, then that will imply that G1 G2 inverse belongs to NH, and that will prove that NH is a subgroup. So by group theoretic law, this will be G1 G2 inverse, or is it better to write it in the equation array format? Now G1 G2 inverse H G1 G2 inverse is equal to G1 G2 H. If we calculate this, you can take individual inverses, but the order will be reversed. So that means G2 inverse G1 inverse. H G2 inverse is G2 G1 inverse. Because of associativity available in the group, this entire thing can be written like this. And that is why we needed this. So now this middle term is equal to H. And this is already equal to H from here. So that's it. We have shown what we wanted to show. This H, this inverse is equal to H. Hence, G1 G2 inverse belongs to NH. Which shows that NH is a subgroup of G. Okay, so part A is over. Now in part B, we have to show that H is a subgroup of NH. First we need to show that H is contained in NH, that is, H is a normal subgroup of NH, that's what we have to show. So first we need to show that H is a subgroup of NH. Let H belongs to H, since H is a subgroup of G, we have H inverse equal to H. This implies since H inverse is equal to H, so this implies H belongs to NH. This just shows that capital H is a subset of NH. Hence, that is, since capital H is a group, H is a, and this is also a group, we have shown in part A. So this is a subgroup of NH. Next we turn to the normality of H in NH. Okay, let G belong to NH, and okay, let us just simply take G belonging to NH. Then since G is in NH, by the definition of NH, GH G inverse will be equal to H, but that just says that H is normal in NH. So part B is over. In part C, we are given that H is a normal subgroup of some other subgroup K of G. So we are going to assume that. Let K be a subgroup of G such that H is a normal subgroup of K. Okay, we now have to show that K is contained in NH. So let us take any element of K. Let K be any element in K. Normality of H in K then implies KHK inverse is equal to H. But now you look at the last equation. This just simply tells us that K belongs to NH. But then K belongs to NH. So capital K is contained in NH. Okay. So this is part C, and finally part D. In part D, we have to prove that if our group H is originally a normal subgroup of G, then NH must be equal to G, and conversely also. Assume that H is normal in G. Then for any G belonging to G, we have GH G inverse equal to H from normality of H in G, and hence and so G belongs to NH. Okay. This implies G, any element in G has been shown to be in NH. So G is contained in NH. But we already have NH contained in G, because G is the largest group in which everything is happening, and all the other systems are subgroups of G. So G is equal to NH. Conversely, we are going to assume this and prove that H is normal in G. Conversely, assume G equal to NH, but then by the definition of NH and this equality, then for any G belonging to G, G belongs to NH, and hence GH G inverse is equal to H. This proves that H is normal in G. And this completes part D, and it completes the solution, and it completes today's video also on group theory. But before I end the video, let's just tell me, okay. Yeah, this slip of tongues will be there. Let me tell you some more things about NH. The reason for this notation, this N, is that it has a name. It is called, although in this book they haven't said, I think they haven't called it normalizer or anything like that, at least not yet. It is called the normalizer of H in G. normalizer in the sense, and because of normalizer this n has come. In this sense, suppose G is your group, this is your subgroup H. The exercise we have solved right now tells us that NH contains H as a subgroup. Not only that, H is normal in NH. What more is true, NH is the largest subgroup of G in which H is normal. That means NH is the largest subgroup of G which gives H the environment, largest possible environment in which it can be normal. In that sense, NH normalizes H. Okay, so that's why the name is normalizer. And from this you can clearly see that if our original H is normal in G, then G becomes a subgroup of G in which H is normal. But since NH has to be the largest in such environment, so in our this case G has to be equal to NH, and the converse is also true. So this may give you an idea of what NH actually is. It is the largest region in which H will be normal. Okay, and for every subgroup you will have a normalizer. There are some subgroups whose normalizers turn out to be equal to the subgroup itself. Their largest regions in which they are normal are the smallest possible. Okay, such subgroups are also there. Do they have a name or not? I don't remember. I don't think they have a name. Something else has a name, but that is a different thing. So here I end the video. If you are new to this channel, please consider subscribing if you find these things useful, that is. So see you in the next video. We will solve the other exercises. We will try to finish it. So that will be all for tonight. This is me, Lucifer, from A Mathematical Room. Have a nice night.